Looking back, the whole fiasco unfolded exactly as you'd imagine. An immortal alien species getting a little too smug at a diplomatic conference. You know, the kind where everyone's pretending to promote peace and understanding, but really they're just there to subtly boast about their accomplishments while nibbling on extravagant space snacks. I'm Ethan Harrison, a human diplomat. Well, diplomat extraordinaire, though these days across the galaxy, I'm better known as Just Watch This Harrison. Not the diplomatic legacy I was hoping for, but hey, when life hands you lemons, you turn them into a fusion reactor, right? That's the human way. The annual Galactic Species Conference of 2187 was taking place on Centaur Prime, in one of those floating crystal palaces that are practically mandatory for any serious interstellar gathering. You've seen the type. Gravity-defying architecture, bioluminescent structures everywhere, and enough holographic displays to make anyone with more than 2 eyes feel like they're about to have a seizure. It was at this spectacle that I first encountered the Zerothians. Imagine the most condescending professor you've ever had. Multiply that by 1,000,000 years of wisdom, and then package it all in bodies that looked like living mercury mixed with the glow of a sunset. Beautiful? Absolutely. Annoying? You have no idea. Their leader, High Zerothian Chronic, yes, they were that literal with their names, was holding court near the quantum champagne fountain, surrounded by a crowd of younger species. And by younger, I mean civilizations that had only been spacefaring for a few thousand years. Basically freshmen at a senior party. You see, Chronic began, his liquid metal form shimmering with what I could only identify as smugness. True civilization requires patience. We Zerothians spent 50,000 years perfecting faster-than-light travel before even considering our first journey. I tried to hold my tongue, but when you hear someone brag about taking 50,000 years to do something humans cracked in less than 3 centuries, it's like a reflex. You just have to respond. Sounds inefficient, I said, making sure my voice carried over the soft background music. The crowd split like I'd just announced a space plague outbreak. Chronic's form rippled, morphing into sharp, aggressive angles. Ah, the human representative, he sneered. How refreshing to hear your species' unique perspective. Though perhaps unique is a more polite way of saying recklessly accelerated. We prefer efficiently innovative, I shot back, grabbing something that looked suspiciously like a shrimp puff from a hovering tray. Why spend 50,000 years doing something when you can do it in 300? The Zerothians' laugh sounded like wind chimes being blown through a tornado. Young species, Chronic mused, always so proud of their rushed accomplishments. Tell me, human, how many test pilots did you lose in the development of your FTL drives? None, I replied. We figured out the math first. That got his attention. His form turned even more jagged. Impossible, Chronic whispered in disbelief. The quantum calculations alone took us about 20 years once we got our quantum computers online. Funny how you can do all that when you're not spending millennia rechecking every decimal, I remarked. By now the crowd had grown, and representatives from at least 30 species were watching us like we were the best reality show in the galaxy, which, considering some of the entertainment out there, probably wasn't far off. Chronic's form had now compressed into something that looked like a very angry silver pine cone. There are certain monumental achievements, human, that cannot simply be rushed. Some things require the weight of centuries, the accumulation of endless wisdom and experience. Your species could never— I interrupted, finishing my space shrimp. Name one thing. Just one thing you think humans couldn't possibly match or surpass in a fraction of your timeline. Chronic didn't hesitate. The Nexus Bridge. Ah, the Nexus Bridge, the Zerothians' crowning glory, a massive structure they had built between 2 galaxies, allowing instantaneous travel between them. It had taken them 2,000,000 years to complete, and they never, ever let anyone forget it. So how long did it take? I asked, already knowing I was about to light the fuse on something big. 2,000,000 years of uninterrupted effort, Chronic declared proudly. The greatest engineering feat in the history of the universe. Something your fleeting species could never even hope to— We'll do it in 50 years, I interrupted. The silence that followed was so thick, you could have heard a quark hit the floor. Impossible, Chronic muttered under his breath, his form practically vibrating with indignation. I flashed a grin, pulled out my datapad, and shot off a quick message to Earth. Hey, remember that crazy idea about folding space-time using human stupidity? Yeah, we're actually doing it. Also, we made a bet. Don't make me look bad. Then, looking back at Chronic, I said the words that would soon echo across 2 galaxies, both famous and infamous. Hold my beer. The response from Earth arrived in exactly 2.3 seconds. Either humanity's brightest minds were already on board with my insane idea, or more likely they didn't even read past, "Hey, want to show up some immortal aliens?" The message simply said, "Operation Beer Hold is go, team assembling. Try not to start an interstellar incident for at least 48 hours. Too late. By the time I got back to Earth, they'd already assembled what could only be described as humanity's finest collection of brilliant idiots. The kind of people who see literally impossible as an invitation and certain death as an exciting data point. The meeting room at the United Earth Science Division looked like someone had ransacked every mad scientist's lab on the planet. Holographic equations were floating in the air, half-finished gadgets beeped ominously in every corner, and at least 3 different coffee machines were brewing at full tilt. You know it's serious when scientists break out the backup coffee makers. Professor Maya Collins. The first person to greet me was Professor Maya Collins, or, well, greet might not be the right word. She didn't even look up from the explosive device she was tinkering with, but she did wave a screwdriver in my direction. "So, you're the diplomat who volunteered us to build an impossible bridge," she said, adjusting something on the device that made it pulse with an unnerving glow. "I like your style. By the way, if anyone asks, this is technically not a bomb. It's an aggressive matter reorganizer." Maya had earned the nickname Boom Boom Collins after accidentally discovering a new form of fusion while attempting to build a better coffee machine. The explosion that followed wiped out half a laboratory, but it also revolutionized energy production. These days, she's banned from being within 100 meters of any coffee-making equipment. Next up was Captain Liam Bennett, lurking in the corner surrounded by displays showing every possible way our project could go horribly wrong. And when I say every, I mean every possible way. The guy had somehow managed to work attacked by time-traveling dinosaurs into his risk assessment. "According to my calculations," he announced cheerfully, "this project has a 99.9% chance of catastrophic failure. The remaining 0.1% involves scenarios so bizarre they loop back around to working perfectly." He flashed a grin. "Those are the best odds I've seen all year." Liam had earned the nickname Murphy's Law Bennett by being the only person in history to predict exactly how things would go wrong and then use those predictions to turn the failures into success. His disaster scenarios were more reliable than most people's best-case plans. Then, there was Dr. Harper Caldwell, completing our core team. She was sitting cross-legged on a desk, surrounded by quantum probability maps that looked like someone had given a kaleidoscope sentience and fed it some bad math. "The good news," she said without a hint of preamble, "is that I've figured out how to fold space-time using human stupidity as a catalyst." I raised an eyebrow. "And the bad news? We'll need about 8 million hold-my-beer moments, all concentrated into a single point in space-time." She paused. "Also, we might accidentally create a new universe, but it'll be small. Just a tiny one. Harper had a reputation for solving impossible problems by asking questions no sane person would even consider. Her doctoral thesis? Why not? A quantum mechanical analysis of just going for it. I glanced around at my new team. Let me get this straight. We're going to build a bridge between galaxies using experimental explosives, deliberately engineered disasters, and weaponized bad decisions. Maya corrected me, raising her definitely not a bomb device. "Actually, we're going to build it in 50 years instead of 2 million. The crazy methods are just a bonus." "The Zerothians are going to have an aneurysm," I said, grinning. "Can their species even get aneurysms?" "Give me 5 minutes with this device," Maya replied, "and we'll find out." Meanwhile, Liam was updating his disaster boards. "I've just added causing the first recorded medical emergency in an immortal species to our potential outcomes. It's now sitting between accidental creation of time-traveling coffee and bridge works perfectly, but only on Tuesdays." Harper, still absorbed in her equations, finally spoke up. You know what the real problem with the Zerothians' approach was? They spent 2 million years trying not to do anything stupid. They completely ignored the power of concentrated human audacity as a fundamental force of nature. She had a point. While the Zerothians had spent millennia meticulously calculating every possible outcome, humanity had built an interstellar civilization largely by saying, I wonder what happens if I push this button, and then dealing with the consequences. All right, I said, pulling up a chair. Show me what you've got so far. Maya held up her device. Well, this either generates a localized space-time distortion or makes really good toast. Won't know until we try. I've calculated 347 ways this could destroy the universe, Liam chimed in, but at least 60 of them look really cool on paper. Harper looked up from her work. I think I just proved that confidence is technically a quantum state. Also, we might need to borrow the moon for a few experiments, just for a weekend, tops. I looked around at my team. A demolitions expert who treated the laws of physics like polite suggestions, a disaster specialist whose worst-case scenarios could be the plot of a B-movie, and a quantum physicist who thought the universe's sense of possibility was more of a guideline than a rule. The Zerothians won't know what hit them, I said. Oh, they will, Maya corrected. I'm going to label all the explosions, and with that, Operation Beerhold was officially underway. The first week of Operation Beerhold was something I can only describe as the most educated form of spitballing in human history. Our planning sessions didn't look like serious scientific endeavors. They looked more like a group of hyperactive kindergartners had stolen a physics textbook. Okay, Maya said, standing in front of our main display board. Current plan. We build a series of really big explosions. Controlled matter-energy conversions, I corrected, realizing the Zerothians were watching us like hawks. Right. Controlled matter-energy conversions that punch small holes in space-time, Maya continued. Then we sort of stitched them together. Harper raised her hand. Question. What are we using for thread? Quantum entanglement fields, enhanced by pure human determination, Maya replied with absolute confidence. That's not a thing, one of the Zerothian observers said. It will be by Tuesday, Harper shot back without missing a beat. I've already written the equations. They're mostly correct if you don't think about them too hard. Liam updated his disaster board again. Latest calculations suggest a 50% chance of creating a bridge to another universe instead of another galaxy. On the bright side, real estate opportunities could be fantastic. The Zerothians had insisted on sending observers to monitor our progress. They probably expected to witness our spectacular failure, but instead, they were getting front-row seats to humanity's finest tradition, achieving the impossible by sheer audacity. The impossible, achieved through a combination of serious science and pure nonsense. Here's what I don't get. The lead Zerothian observer, who introduced himself as Tempest, said, Your calculations clearly show this is impossible. Your material science indicates the structure can't exist, and basic physics argues against every step of your process. And yet you continue? Welcome to human science, I replied, grinning. Would you like to see our timeline spreadsheet? Liam, always on top of the data, had color-coded it based on explosion size. Controlled matter-energy conversion size, Maya corrected, winking. Tempest floated closer to our main display. His mercury-like form rippled, and I was pretty sure that was the Zerothian equivalent of a headache. You've labeled this section the really tricky part and just written figure it out later with 3 question marks, he said, his voice dripping with disbelief. 4 question marks, Harper corrected, never looking up from her equations. The 4th one is quantum. That's not how quantum mechanics works, Tempest insisted. Not yet, Maya agreed cheerfully. But we've got a great track record of changing how things work. Did you know humans weren't supposed to be able to digest dairy? We just kept doing it until evolution gave up and rewrote our genetics. A horrified silence fell over the Zerothian observers. Liam, never one to miss an opportunity, looked up from his disaster calculations. Did you know that, technically, given our current understanding of physics, bumblebees shouldn't be able to fly? Tempest gave him a puzzled glance. What's your point? No point, Liam said casually. Just think it's neat that they do it anyway. Kind of inspiring, really. Meanwhile, Harper had covered an entire wall with equations that looked like someone had handed a kaleidoscope sentience and let it doodle after a bad math class. "The way I see it," she said, "the Zerothians spent 2 million years working with the universe. We're going to spend 50 years convincing the universe to work with us, by breaking fundamental laws of physics. By politely suggesting they're more like physics guidelines," Maya added with a grin. Tempest's form flickered as he processed the statement. "That's not a fundamental force," the Zerothian observers said in unison. "Yet," Maya shot back, pulling out another device that definitely wasn't a bomb. "Give me 5 minutes." I looked at my team. Maya, sketching explosion patterns that would make fractal mathematics seem simple. Liam, calculating the probability of our project accidentally creating time travel. 38%, apparently. And Harper, who was explaining to the increasingly distressed Zerothian observers why human stubbornness could technically be considered a form of energy. "Should we tell them about Phase 2? Liam asked, glancing at the worried observers. "Phase 2? Tempest's voice rippled nervously. "There's a Phase 2? "Oh yeah," Maya said, grinning widely. "Phase 1 is just figuring out how to break physics. Phase 2 is where we start playing with it." Tempest turned to me, his voice dripping with disbelief. "Your species is insane." "Technically," Harper called out from her corner, "we're quantum superpositioned between insane and brilliant. The waveform doesn't collapse until after we succeed, or accidentally create a new dimension. Which reminds me," she added casually, "we should probably warn the cafeteria staff about next Thursday's experiment. The laws of thermodynamics are going to be more like thermal suggestions for about 20 minutes. I couldn't help but smile as I watched the Zerothian observers try to process what they were witnessing. Their species had spent 2 million years carefully working within the rules of the universe. Meanwhile, humanity's approach seemed more like, the rules are more like guidelines anyway, and if we break them with enough style, maybe they'll change to match what we're doing. "Don't worry," I told Tempest. "This is actually going better than expected." "How could this possibly be going better than expected?" Tempest asked, utterly baffled. "Well," Liam said, consulting his disaster board, "we haven't accidentally erased ourselves from existence yet. No one's become their own grandparent, and the coffee machine is only violating 3 laws of physics instead of the usual 5. "Just another day at Operation Beerhold," Maya chimed in, beaming, "where we're about to prove that humanity's greatest superpower isn't our technology or intelligence. It's our absolute refusal to accept that something is impossible just because everyone says it is. And we were just getting started." The first major breakthrough in Operation Beerhold came, as most human breakthroughs do, through something going spectacularly wrong. We'd been running tests on Maya's latest aggressive matter reorganizer when everything went sideways. Literally, the entire lab tilted 90 degrees relative to normal spacetime while maintaining standard gravity. "Huh," Maya said, standing on what used to be the wall. "That's new." Harper, already scribbling equations on what used to be the floor, now a wall, looked up with wide eyes. "Do you realize what this means? We've accidentally discovered localized spacetime reorientation. I believe the technical term," Liam added from his now vertical desk, "is we broke geometry." The Zerothian observers were having what appeared to be an existential crisis. Tempest's usually smooth, mercury-like form had developed glitch patterns. "You can't just rotate space-time?" he sputtered. "Well, obviously we can," Maya replied nonchalantly. "We just did. The real question is, can we rotate it back before the cafeteria serves lunch?" "I'm not eating spaghetti sideways," I muttered, just as the second accident happened. One of Harper's quantum probability matrices intersected with the spatially rotated zone, and suddenly, voila, our first prototype. It wasn't exactly pretty. It wasn't stable either, and technically it only bridged the gap between the lab and the parking lot. But hey, it was a space-time bridge. "See? I told you it would work," I said, proudly gesturing toward the flickering distortion. The Zerothians, however, weren't as impressed. "This isn't progress!" Tempest cried, his form rippling in shock. "This is a violation of the natural order! You're supposed to spend at least 10,000 years on theoretical calculations before attempting anything this bold!" Bold of you to assume we did any calculations, Harper muttered as she continued scribbling away, unfazed. And then came the third accident. Liam's disaster prediction system, which had been running simulations non-stop, suddenly started to smoke. Not your run-of-the-mill smoke either. This stuff formed intricate fractal patterns in the air and smelled distinctly like mathematical proofs. "Oh dear," Liam said, looking at the readouts on his screen. "According to this, we've created a quantum state so unstable that the universe has no choice but to either let us succeed or admit it's been making up the rules all along." "You mean we can break it?" Maya perked up. "Technically, yes," Harper added. "We already did. The Zerothians, now panicked, were sending urgent messages back to their homeworld. I caught phrases like reality breach, protocol violation, and send help. Naturally, this caught the attention of other species. The Galactic Council sent observers who brought in their experts, and soon those experts called for backup. Within a week, our humble Earth lab had become the largest gathering of alien scientists in human history. They came from every corner of the galaxy to explain why our project would never work. The Hive Mind Collective ran probability matrices showing a 99.99% chance of failure. Maya, ever the optimist, taped the results to the ceiling, now the wall, and used them as a to-do list of things to prove wrong. The Silicon Consciousness uploaded detailed simulations, proving that our bridge design violated 37 fundamental laws of physics. Harper responded by sending them back with corrections, showing it actually violated 42, but with style. The quantum amalgamation, a species that existed in multiple dimensions at once, tried to explain why our approach to space-time manipulation was dangerously primitive. Liam, looking slightly smug, added to his achievement board, "Accidentally teaches multi-dimensional beings new physics." Then came the day of the first full-scale test. "All right," I said, addressing the ever-expanding crowd of alien observers, "we're about to attempt our first major space-time fold. Any questions before we start?" A forest of appendages rose into the air. "Any questions that aren't about how ridiculously dangerous and unscientific this is?" I clarified. All appendages dropped, except for one. "Yes," asked the representative from the gas giant consciousness. "Will there be more explosions?" Maya grinned ear to ear. "Oh, definitely. Excellent. We've deployed additional recording devices," came the reply. "The test, well, it was... Remember how I said the first breakthrough came from something going wrong? Turns out that's the secret to human innovation. We're exceptionally good at taking everything that goes wrong and making it go exactly as planned, except we just don't know the plan until it's already happening. The initial power-up sequence caused every coffee machine within 100 miles to achieve sentience. This wasn't part of the plan, but the newly awakened coffee collective proved surprisingly helpful with the calculations. The first space-time fold attempt created a temporary mirror dimension where everything was exactly the same, except probability was reversed. The improbable was guaranteed, and the guaranteed was improbable. We lost 3 lab coats and gained 5 that had never existed before. Maya's carefully calculated detonation sequence, which by the way she still refused to call explosions, somehow caused a localized breach in causality. For about 15 minutes, effects were happening before their causes. It was a real mess for lunch orders, but it gave us fascinating data about temporal mechanics. Then, right in the middle of what the Zerothians were calling the most irresponsible experiment in galactic history, everything suddenly worked. "Sort of," I said, glancing at Tempest, whose form flickered like an overloaded circuit. "Define sort of," he demanded, visibly rattled. "Well," Harper said, consulting readings that were inexplicably existing in 4 dimensions at once, "we've successfully created a stable space-time bridge. It's just not pointing where we expected." "When is it pointing?" Liam asked, peering at his disaster board. "Also, what universe?" Maya, already collecting data from the bridge, smiled. "Terminus. Good news. I found where it goes. Bad news, well. Actually, no. It's all good news if you're into practical applications of parallel universe theory." I glanced over at my team, covered in coffee stains, temporal residue, and what could only be described as geometric paradoxes, and then looked out at our audience of increasingly concerned alien observers. So, I said with a grin, who wants to help us redirect this thing? I promise only half of the methods we try will violate causality. The Zerothians, now sending messages that were nothing but emergency alert symbols, had clearly lost all hope. The other alien species, however, were displaying a concerning level of interest. Watching humans break physics, apparently, was the galaxy's hottest new entertainment. You know what the really interesting part is? Harper said, examining our accidental breakthrough. We've technically already proved the Zerothians wrong. They said we couldn't build a galaxy-spanning bridge in less than 2 million years. They never specified which galaxies, or which timeline, or which universe. That's not... Tempest sputtered, horrified. Already did, Maya interrupted cheerfully. Now we're just working on the aimed version. Anyone want to help me calibrate the next, definitely not an explosion? And that's how humanity proved that sometimes the best way to achieve the impossible is by accident, while trying to do something even more impossible. The universe never stood a chance. Part 5. The big show word spreads fast in the galactic community, especially when the word spread that humans were about to do something spectacularly stupid or brilliantly inspired. By the time we were ready for our final test, we had an audience that could make the Super Bowl look like a quiet dinner party. Every spacefaring species had sent representatives. The Hive Mind Collective had allocated 30% of its processing power just to watch us. The Silicon Consciousness was running bets on whether we'd survive. Even the usually reclusive dark matter engineers had come out of their quantum hiding places to witness whatever was about to unfold. A silicon being stood up and announced, current odds, complete failure 3, 1, spectacular explosion, 2, 1, accidental creation of new physics, 5, 1, actually works as intended 1000, 1. Put me down for works as intended, I said with a grin. I figured I might as well profit from our eventual success. The Zerothians had brought their entire council of temporal wisdom, probably to document what they thought would be humanity's greatest failure. Chronic himself had shown up. His liquid metal form somehow managed to convey both concern and condescension at the same time. You do realize, he said, floating over to our control center, that your species will be remembered for this moment for millions of years? Yeah, Maya replied, not even looking up from calibrating her final array of definitely not bombs. But the real question is, will we be remembered in this timeline, or the one we're about to create by accident? Our setup looked like someone had given a modern art installation a nuclear power source. Harper's quantum matrices floated in complex patterns, visible only because they bent light in ways it had never agreed to. Liam's disaster prevention systems covered every possible angle, including those that shouldn't have existed in three-dimensional space. Final checks, I called out. Maya, how are our space-time destabilizers? Primed and ready to violate at least 12 laws of physics, Maya said, giving me a thumbs up. 13 if we're lucky. Liam, disaster scenarios down to just 300 possible extinction-level events. Personal best. Harper? Quantum calculations are complete. I've convinced the universe that what we're about to do is actually a mathematical proof of its own existence. It's either going to let us succeed, or it's going to have to admit it doesn't exist. The Zerothian Council was going through what could only be described as a collective breakdown. Their forms kept shifting between panic, disbelief, and what looked suspiciously like curiosity. You can't just... Chronic began, his tone almost desperate. Already are, Maya sang out, hitting the switch to initiate the power-up sequence. The first stage went exactly as planned, which, for anyone who knew anything about human engineering, was extremely worrisome. Things never go exactly as planned unless they're about to go spectacularly wrong. Space began to fold. Not metaphorically. Actually, visibly. Reality itself bent like origami being folded by an over-enthusiastic child hopped up on sugar. Colors appeared that hadn't existed before. Some of them weren't even theoretically possible. Is it supposed to do that? One of the Zerothian council members asked, pointing at a spot where space-time had developed polka dots. Probably not, Harper replied cheerfully. But it's doing it with such confidence. The universe seems willing to go along with it. The second stage kicked in. Maya's devices, let's be honest, They were explosions no matter how much she tried to deny it, began firing in sequence. Each detonation punched a hole in reality, and Harper's quantum matrices immediately snatched them up, stitching them together like the most dangerous quilt imaginable. "We've got bridge formation," Liam shouted. "Also, several new forms of mathematics, and, I think we just invented time." "Pretty sure time already existed," an Eternal called out from the crowd. "Not this version," Harper shot back with a grin. The Silicon Consciousness updated their odds, putting working as intended at 500 to 1. "Any takers?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. "Double my bet." The final stage was the big one, the point where all our carefully calculated chaos, all our precisely measured mayhem, and all our scientifically quantified impossibilities were meant to merge into one perfect, human-made moment of "hold my beer," taken to its logical extreme. That's when Murphy's Law kicked in. "Slight problem," Liam said, his voice tight as he studied his readings. "The good news is, we're about to succeed beyond our wildest expectations. The bad news is physics has formally filed a complaint." "What kind of complaint?" I asked, eyebrows raised. "The kind that comes with a cease and desist order from causality itself." Maya was already adjusting her equipment. "Tell causality to take a number and get in line. We're a little busy rewriting reality right now." The bridge was forming. You could see it happening, a massive structure of pure possibility, held together by mathematics that hadn't been invented yet, powered by humanity's utter refusal to acknowledge limitations. "It's working!" Harper shouted over the sound of physics having an existential crisis. "It's actually working! Also, I think we just proved free will exists." "That wasn't part of the project," Tempest said weakly. "Bonus feature," Maya replied, grinning. The final sequence kicked in. Reality held its breath. The entire audience of alien species leaned forward in anticipation, those who had a forward to lean toward anyway. The Zerothians' forms froze mid-ripple. And then, well, we did exactly what humanity does best. We succeeded for entirely the wrong reasons, but in exactly the right way. The bridge stabilized. Not just stabilized, it worked better than anyone, including us, had predicted. We'd built a bridge between galaxies in 50 years, instead of 2 million, and we'd done it by convincing the universe that impossibility was more of a suggestion than a rule. The Silicon Consciousness's betting systems crashed. The Hive Mind Collective had to allocate an additional 40% of its processing power just to comprehend what they were seeing. The dark matter engineers emerged fully from their quantum shadows for the first time in recorded history, just to get a better look. And then, Chronic floated forward, his liquid metal form flickering through every possible configuration of disbelief. "That's not possible. You can't—" "Want to test it out?" Maya interrupted, flashing a grin. I asked, pulling out a cold beer I'd saved for exactly this moment. "Here, hold this for me." Part 6. Aftermath and universe-wide facepalm. Here's the thing about making the impossible possible. It tends to create big ripple effects. I'm talking about universe restructuring, galaxy-shaking kinds of ripples. Within a week of our successful bridge test, the Galactic Council had to establish an entirely new department just to manage humans saying, "Hold my beer." They called it the Department of Improbability Management and Damage Control. The acronym was IMDC, but everyone knew it stood for, "I must deal with crazy." To their credit, the Zerothians admitted defeat with a certain grace. Well, as much grace as you can manage when you're having an existential crisis that spans multiple dimensions. "We hereby acknowledge," Chronic said, his liquid metal form glitching slightly, "that the human species has achieved in 50 years what took us 2 million. We also formally request that they never ever attempt anything like this again." "No promises," I replied, cutting the ceremonial ribbon with a laser that Maya had modified to make things more exciting. The ribbon didn't just get cut, it transformed into a swarm of quantum butterflies, existing in 6 dimensions at once. The Silicon Consciousness was still paying out betting debts 3 months later. Turns out, a lot of species had bet on humans pulling it off, mostly on the principle that anything that improbable had to work, simply because of how improbable it was. The Hive Mind Collective dedicated a whole neural cluster to studying what they called the human improbability factor. Their early findings suggested that humanity's true superpower wasn't our technology or our grit, but our consistent ability to be so wrong about what's impossible, that reality itself eventually just gives up and rewrites the rules. Liam updated his Disaster Master board one last time. Probability of accidental creation of new universal constants, 100%, retroactively. Maya had started teaching a class called Advanced Improbability Engineering at the Galactic Science Academy. The course description? Hold my beer and watch this. Harper's quantum equations were being studied by every major scientific institution in known space, not because anyone understood them, but because they somehow worked better if you didn't try too hard to understand them. But the most profound change came in how the galaxy viewed humanity. We had gone from being the brash, young upstarts to the species you don't challenge to a competition unless you're prepared for them to break the laws of physics just to prove you wrong. The Galactic Council passed what became known as the Hold My Beer Protocol. Anytime a human used that phrase, all nearby species were legally required to either evacuate to a safe distance or stick around to record whatever improbable event was about to unfold. As for me, I got a new title, Ambassador of Improbable Affairs. My job was basically to warn other species when humans were about to do something crazy, and then help explain how we did it afterward. Most of my official reports began with, "You're not going to believe this, but..." The bridge became a tourist attraction, though not for the reasons anyone expected. Sure, it connected two galaxies through a feat of engineering that shouldn't have been possible, but more importantly, it stood as a monument to humanity's greatest achievement, proving that nothing is truly impossible if you're willing to ignore everyone who says it is. During the first official bridge crossing, an Eternal asked me a question that, in hindsight, summed up the entire experience. But how did you know it would work? I looked at him and shrugged. We didn't, I answered honestly. We just decided failure wasn't an option and kept going until the universe ran out of ways to tell us no. The bridge is still there, spanning the gap between galaxies, defying every law of physics that said it couldn't exist. The quantum butterflies from the ribbon-cutting ceremony still flutter around it. Probably Maya's definitely not explosions left permanent imprints on reality that scientists continue to study today. Liam's disaster prediction system occasionally spits out warnings about things going wrong in parallel universes. And somewhere in the vast archives of the Zerothian species, there's a new rule that was added after our success. If a human says, "Hold my beer," don't argue. Just run. Or stick around to watch, but definitely invest in good recording equipment first. As for Operation Beerhold's team, last I heard, Maya was working on something she called completely safe, probably. Liam had started calculating the odds of successfully teaching quantum physics to cats, just because someone said it was impossible. Harper had moved on to proving that imagination could be used as an alternative energy source. As for me, I kept the beer Chronic had held during the final test. It sits on my desk as a reminder that the difference between impossible and improbable is often just a matter of finding the right humans to say, "Challenge accepted." Besides, we're already planning phase 2, but that's another story, and I'm pretty sure the universe isn't ready for that one yet.